What advice would you give to someone looking to quit porn? I would say it isn't that you're trying to quit porn. It's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that you're trying to figure out how to have a better life. Stick around to the end. There might be coils to that freedom of expression, some potential educational utility, the pleasure that's a consequence of sexual utilization of pornographic material. But I would still say, seeing all that it's not a net social. It doesn't do the people who produce it or who consume it any good, and I don't believe that anyone feels like a better human being after utilizing pornography for sexual gratification. Now you might say, well, that's because they've been shamed about sex since they're born. And that's a consequence of our crooked culture. And in a utopian world, we wouldn't have that shame. And it's way more complicated than that. I read something in one of the YouTube comments on my video the other day. I was talking to Abigail Schreier about the apparent fact that today's teenagers are having much less sex. One person commented, there's the shame that men feel when sex is a spectator sport rather than a participatory act. And then you think, well, the mere fact that you're watching two other people, one of whom isn't you having sex instead of having sex, implies something about your desirability. It's pretty hard to shake that, isn't it? Or your courage. Why is it that you're sitting there alone at night with your laptop on your lap? What the hell's wrong? Well, nothing. It's just we should dispense with sexual shame. It's like, no, probably not. That's probably not the answer. Well, it's like Treasure Island in Pinot. It's all pleasure with no responsibility. That's deadening. It's part in a sense. And I'm not making a value judgment. I mean, it's no wonder the young guys are caught up in this because it's an unbelievably powerful technology. It drove the development of the internet, let's not forget, right? So it taps into one viciously priority motivation. And so these guys are being blasted by what biologists call superstimuli all the time. So imagine that there's a biological stimulus that has an effect on you, and then you can magnify it. And the typical porn actress, not the amateurs, but the professionals, have their sexually provocative physical elements exaggerated, and so men are very visual in terms of their sexual processing. And so the guys are pulled into it, and they're pulled into it also by curiosity. But I think that ethically it's not good. It's not good. It's an easy out, that's the other thing. What you should be doing is going out and finding someone to have a relationship with. But let's say you can't find someone. Well, then you might say that's an indication you should change. It is in fact an indication that you should change, because what better indication are you going to get than that? No one wants to be intimate with you. It's the ultimate rejection. And that's partly why men are terrified of it, and I understand that. And I understand the MGTOW guys, who are recommended. Men don't enter into long-term permanent relationships with women. I understand where they're coming from. Well, they're providing a lot of young guys who need a kick to go out there. They're gone, right? They're actually giving them the back door. They're giving them a rationale. Yeah. And I've seen this have very detrimental effects on a number of people already, and partly in my clinical practice, because the young guys who aren't successful, they're looking for a reason why women are. Because otherwise, they have to think, well, they're just not presentable, which is what they do have to think, because that's almost the definition of presentable. And then the MGTOW guys give them a rationale. We are in a GY-centric world, and females have got control, and they'll wipe you out if they have the opportunity. It's like some females will do that to some guys some of the time, and sometimes it's brutal. I've had clients who have been dragged through the court systems and just ruined, and I was unable to help them. I did everything I could to maneuver it, and negotiate and plan and strategize so carefully to get them to do everything right. And it didn't help. I mean, the court systems can be absolutely brutal to men. It's awful. Yeah, that's really interesting. So the guys that are taking the easy out on that, so to speak, and disconnecting from having those relationships, in a way it's just a different out that porn is replacing that human connection too. There's a novelty edge in pornography, like there is in so many quasi-addictive phenomena, because novelty is a sexual kick. It has to stay novel, and that means that over time it's going to become more extreme. So that's not good. Well, so how do you resensitize yourself in some sense while you stop? You stop, and then hopefully you recover, and then you deprive yourself of that outlet, let's say. And you might say, well, is that absolutely necessary? And maybe there's nothing wrong with pornography. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Have you ever really met a guy who is proud of that? You know what I mean. That makes them feel like I'm the guy, man. I'm watching pornography and getting off, what a man. I don't believe anyone feels that. And to me, that's an indication that, yeah, we know. No, it's pretty cheap. It was cheap. I say that knowing that I believe the research evidence shows that if you introduce pornography into a community, the rates of sexual crime committed by men upon women actually decline. So there is perhaps some utility in the outlet. But you know, that's a unit-dimensional analysis and doesn't take into account all the others. Effects of pornography. Yeah, so including the ones you described. And I think that those are real. It makes sense that they're real, you know, because it's super satiation. It's a non-trivial technological problem. You know, it's now possible for young men to look at more beautiful nude women in one day than any man has ever seen. You know, prior to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that any man in history had ever seen. That's not anything. That's something. And to think that doesn't do anything to you, no, that likely does something to you. So don't substitute the false for the real and don't underestimate the utility of deprivation. What advice would you give to someone looking to quit porn? Well, I gave some advice a little earlier about quitting alcohol, you know, and I would say it isn't that you're trying to quit porn. It's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that you're trying to figure out how to have a better life, and so you have to figure it out. Well, I would say do the future authoring program and keep your porn addiction in mind and think. So in the first part of the future authoring program, it asks you a bunch of questions about what your life could be like in 3 to 5 years. If you took care of yourself like you were someone that you cared for. Then it asks you questions about your friends and your family and your career, and your time outside of work and your health, and you know, the important dimensions of life, and it asks you to 20 minutes writing about how good your life could be in 3 to 5 years if you got your act together and did what was good for you. And then it asked you to write about the hell you could be in if you didn't. And so I would say you really need to do that because porn isn't the issue. The issue is that you're not living your life the way you want to. And so you need a vision of life that's more compelling than porn. And you need a counter vision too, that frightens you, you know, because other porn is obviously extraordinarily gratifying in the short term. But you seem to be suffering from the medium to long-term consequences of its use. And so you need a story that you can tell yourself that's really deeply thought through about why this is not appropriate for you, how it's hurting you and how it's minimizing you, and perhaps making you embarrassed and ashamed and more socially isolated and all of that. So I would say, think about it. Cleaning up your psyche and your behavior rather than merely stopping porn. You also might want to write down, and you could do this in the negative vision part of the future program. You gotta write down everything bad that you think porn is doing to you because obviously you have some suspicions that this is not good for you, right? That it's actually harming you in some important way. And so you need to be fully cognizant of what those ways are and then take them seriously and decide if that's the pathway through life on which you wish to travel. And then I would also say good luck to you. You know, it's a very good idea to identify one of your weaknesses and work on it. You can strengthen yourself substantially by doing that. If you think Jordan's advice is helpful, like this video, where are you in your journey to battle porn? If you have to feed porn, what made the difference?